I began to think to myself, if I leave prison doing the same things that led me here, I'm going to be dead or back in prison. I grew up in Green Acres, Florida, in a good family, middle-class home, and my parents did the best that they could to provide for me. I had an older brother and two uncles who lived with me from time to time. The only problem is that in my house, drugs were prevalent. And as time went on, my mom ended up divorcing my dad, and so my dad, my brother, and I ended up living together, and I ended up finding myself homeless on the street, my dad and my brother. It wasn't long after that, I ended up stealing to support my habit, and I ended up in county jail, and I did some prison time. I went to jail for drug possession. I didn't know how I would get through it, but when I got out of that prison the first time, I ended up going back around my father and my brother. I was back down the same path that led me back to prison. And eventually, it wasn't long after that I ended up in prison facing 5 years, and I was in the county jail. It wasn't until I got to a prison out in Pahokee, Florida called Sago Palm Reentry, and I heard a song by Chris Tomlin. It was called White Flag, and it talked about we surrendered. That was the day that I made a decision that regardless of what I went through, regardless of the difficulties, the opposition, or even failure, I was going to pursue God wholeheartedly. From that moment, God broke the desire to use drugs, to even smoke cigarettes, and my only desire became about Him. I positioned myself in a faith-based storm, which Prison Fellowship had some involvement in. They had volunteers that came in, and I would facilitate Bible studies in the class, and we would watch videos, and we built that community. Little did I know that community was a big part of what Prison Fellowship believes. And so when I got released from prison, I heard about a place called the Anchor House, which was a transitional home, and I ended up getting a part-time job at first at a warehouse at Regal Paint, which is a Benjamin Moore franchise. There was a lot of trials, there's a lot of things that I had to go through because I had $10,000 worth of restitution to pay. I couldn't get my license. And so I rode my bike from the Anchor House to work for about a year, and I paid off the $10,000 and I ended up getting my license. Luckily, I had that community, that person to give me an opportunity, to give me a second chance. I started to go to a church, a local church, for 5 years. I got involved in that church. I became an usher where I met my wife, who was over children's ministry. We ended up getting married, and we bought a house together back in 2020, and we had our first son. His name's Gideon, and we now have a newborn at our house who's a month old. His name's Nehemiah. There was so many things that I had to learn and apply to my life getting out, and one was getting my license, getting that restored, building credit, learning how to manage my money. A second chance isn't really something that gets handed to you. It's something that you have to work for and you have to persevere. God placed people in my life to provide that second chance, but it took my determination, it took tenacity to overcome those obstacles and those challenges in society and in life. I would encourage somebody that is going through trials, that if you would trust in God and push forward, you can trust that God has an outcome for that, and He has a plan.